I stood at the edge of the cemetery, the damp earth clinging to my heels, as the wind carried the scent of rain and regret. My husband's casket gleamed under the gray sky, a polished mahogany beacon of finality. Around me, mourners whispered, their voices a low hum, like bees trapped in a jar. I felt their eyes on me. Laura, the second wife, the outsider, the woman who dared to love Daniel after his first wife, their mother, had died. My stepchildren, Emily and Jacob, stood across the grave, their faces carved from stone, their gazes sharp enough to cut. They hadn't spoken to me in days, not since the hospital, not since Daniel's heart gave out. But I didn't expect warmth. I expected silence. What I didn't expect was the venom that came next. "Shut up, you're just the widow," Emily hissed as I began to speak, my voice trembling with a eulogy I'd spent nights crafting. The crowd froze, their murmurs snuffed out. Jacob smirked, his arms crossed, as if his sister's words were a blade he'd helped sharpen. I clutched the journal in my hands, its leather cover worn from years of secrets, and felt my heart lurch. Widow. The word stung, not because it was true, but because it reduced me to no thing of footnote in their father's life. I wanted to scream, to tell them I was more than that I had loved him, fought for him, carried his burdens when they were too busy hating me. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I let the moment burn, let their words sear into me, because I knew what they didn't. I knew the truth buried in the pages I held. Daniel and I met 5 years ago, when I was a paralegal at his law firm, and he was a man drowning in grief. His first wife, Margaret, had been gone for 3 years, but her shadow lingered in every room of his life. Emily and Jacob, then in their early 20s, wore their mother's memory like armor, wielding it against anyone who dared step into her place. I understood their pain, or at least I thought I did. My own mother had died when I was a teenager, and I knew the ache of absence, the way it twists love into something jagged. So I tried. I cooked dinners they wouldn't eat, attended their graduations they didn't invite me to, and smiled through their coldness. Daniel said they'd come around, but they never did. And when he proposed, their resentment hardened into something darker. The funeral was a stage, and I was the villain in their script. As the priest droned on, I saw Emily whisper to Jacob, her eyes flicking toward me. I knew what they thought. I was the gold digger, the interloper who'd stolen their father's fortune. They didn't know about the nights I held Daniel as he wept, confessing the guilt he carried for Margaret's death, for the secrets he'd kept from his children. They didn't know about the journal he'd given me a week before he died, his hands trembling as he pressed it into mine. "Laura," he'd whispered, "when the time comes, show them." I didn't understand then, but I promised. And now, standing at his grave, I felt the weight of that promise like a stone in my chest. The service ended, and the crowd began to disperse, their black umbrellas bobbing like crows taking flight. Emily and Jacob approached, their steps deliberate, their faces masks of disdain. "You don't belong here," Jacob said, his voice low but sharp. "You never did." I wanted to run, to hide, but something in me snapped. I'd spent years swallowing their cruelty, years believing I could earn their love. No more. I opened the journal, my fingers steady despite the tremor in my heart, and began to read aloud. January 12, 2018. I said, my voice cutting through the rain. Margaret didn't die in an accident. She took her own life. And Daniel blamed himself. The air shifted, heavy with shock. Emily's face paled, and Jacob's smirk vanished. I kept reading, each word a hammer striking the lies they'd built their lives on. Daniel's journal was a confession, a raw, unfiltered account of his marriage to Margaret's struggles with depression, his failures to help her, the fights they hid from their children. He wrote about the night she died, how he found her in the garage, the car still running, and how he'd lied to protect Emily and Jacob from the truth. He'd told them it was an accident, a swerve on a rainy road, because he couldn't bear for them to know their mother had chosen to leave. I paused, my throat tight, and looked at them. Emily's eyes were wet, but not with tears of sadness rage. "You're lying," she spat. "You made this up to hurt us." Jacob grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. "You think you can ruin our mother's memory?" he growled. I yanked free, holding the journal like a shield. "This is your father's truth," I said. "Not mine." The mourners who lingered watched, their whispers rising again, but I didn't care. This wasn't about them. It was about Daniel, about the promise I'd made, about the justice he deserved. Emily lunged for the journal, but I stepped back, my heels sinking into the mud. "You don't get to erase this," I said. "You've hated me for years, but I loved him." And he loved you, even when you pushed him away. Jacob laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Love? You don't know what that word means. You're just the widow. There it was again, that word, slicing deeper each time. But I wasn't just the widow. I was the keeper of Daniel's truth, and I would make them see it, no matter the cost. The rain fell harder, blurring the world around us. I flipped to another page, my voice steady now. March 3rd, 2020, I read. Emily and Jacob think I betrayed Margaret by marrying Laura, but they don't know the whole story. Margaret asked me to move on, to find happiness. She made me promise, before she. My voice broke, but I pushed on. She knew she was slipping, and she didn't want me to drown with her. Emily shook her head, her hands clenched into fists. Stop it, she whispered, but there was no strength in it. Jacob just stared, his jaw tight, his eyes searching mine for a lie that wasn't there. I closed the journal, my hands trembling now, not from fear but from the weight of what I'd done. I'd exposed their father's pain, their mother's truth, and I couldn't take it back. I didn't want this, I said softly. But Daniel did. He wanted you to know who he was, who she was. He wanted you to stop hating. Emily turned away, her shoulders shaking, and Jacob just stood there, his face unreadable. The crowd was gone now, leaving just us, three broken pieces of a family that never quite fit together. I didn't know if they'd ever forgive me, but I kept my promise. And in that moment, soaked and shivering, I felt something shift inside me, a flicker of redemption, not for them, but for myself. The drive back to the house was silent, the kind of silence that presses against your skin, heavy and suffocating. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, the journal resting on the passenger seat like a sleeping beast. Emily and Jacob had left the cemetery without another word, their car vanishing into the rain. I didn't know where they went, but I knew they'd be at the house later. Daniel's will was to be read that evening, and they wouldn't miss their chance to claim what they thought was theirs. The house, a sprawling Victorian we'd moved into after our marriage, loomed in my mind, its gabled roof and stained glass windows a monument to a life I tried to build with him. Now, it felt like a battlefield. I parked in the driveway, the gravel crunching under my tires, and sat there for a moment, staring at the front door. It was ajar, swinging slightly in the wind, as if the house itself was restless. Inside, I found the living room dim, the curtains drawn, the air thick with the scent of old wood and memories. Daniel's chair sat empty by the fireplace, his reading glasses still perched on the side table. I touched them, my fingers lingering, and felt a pang of loss so sharp it stole my breath. I wasn't ready for this, not the will, not the fight, not the truth I'd only begun to unravel. The lawyer, Mr. Hargrove, arrived an hour later, his briefcase clutched like a shield. He was a wiry man with kind eyes, but I could tell he sensed the tension brewing. Emily and Jacob arrived shortly after, their faces still carrying the cemetery's chill. They sat on the sofa, side by side, their postures rigid, their eyes avoiding mine. Hargrove cleared his throat, unfolding papers with deliberate care. Let's begin, he said, his voice steady but cautious. He read through the preliminaries. Debts settled, charities named, but I barely listened. My mind was on the journal, now tucked into my bag, its pages burning with secrets I hadn't yet shared. When Hargrove reached the division of assets, Emily leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly. Jacob's jaw twitched, his eyes fixed on the lawyer. The estate, Hargrove said, including the house and primary accounts, is to be divided equally between Laura, Emily, and Jacob. A beat of silence, then Emily laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. Equally, she said. She gets the same as us? She's not even family. Jacob slammed his hand on the coffee table, making the glasses rattle. This is a joke, he said. Dad would never do this. Hargrove adjusted his glasses, unfazed. There's more, he said. Daniel left a letter, to be read aloud. He pulled out an envelope, its edges worn, and my heart sank. I hadn't known about a letter. Hargrove began to read, his voice carrying Daniel's words into the room like a ghost. To my children, Emily and Jacob, and my wife, Laura, he began. If you're hearing this, I'm gone, and I've left you with a mess I couldn't clean up in life. I know you've struggled to accept Laura, and I know why. But she's not your enemy. She's the one who kept me whole when I was falling apart. Emily's face twisted, her eyes flashing with something between pain and fury. Jacob stared at the floor, his hands clenched. Hargrove continued. I've made mistakes, and I've hidden truths to protect you. Laura knows them now, and I trust her to share them when the time is right. Don't let your anger blind you to what matters, family, forgiveness, and the chance to heal. The room was silent, the kind of silence that follows a bomb. I felt their eyes on me, heavy with accusation, but I didn't look away. I couldn't. Emily stood, her voice shaking. You manipulated him, she said. You made him write this. I shook my head, my throat tight. I didn't, I said. This was all Daniel. Jacob snorted, standing to join his sister. You expect us to believe that? You've been scheming since you met him. I wanted to scream, to tell them how wrong they were, but Hargrove raised a hand. There's one more thing, he said. Daniel left a condition. The estate is only yours if you agree to meet with Laura, alone, for one conversation. No lawyers, no distractions. Just the three of you. Emily laughed again, but it was hollow, desperate. You're kidding, she said. Jacob shook his head. We don't need her. We'll fight this. Hargrove's eyes met mine, and I saw a flicker of sympathy. It's non-negotiable, he said. Refuse, and the estate goes to charity. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in. Emily and Jacob exchanged a glance, their faces a mix of disbelief and rage. I didn't move, didn't speak. I knew what they did and that the journal held more than Daniel's confession about Margaret. It held the truth about them, about the lies they'd told themselves, about the revenge they'd planned against me. As Hargrove packed his briefcase, Emily turned to me, her voice low. This isn't over, she said. You think you've won, but you haven't. Jacob nodded, his eyes cold. We'll make sure you get nothing. They left, the door slamming behind them, and I sank into Daniel's chair, the journal in my lap. I opened it to a page I hadn't read aloud, one dated a year before his death. Laura, it read, they're plotting something. I heard them talking, Emily and Jacob. They think you're after the money, and they'll do anything to stop you. Be careful, but don't hate them. They're lost, just like I was. My hands shook as I closed the journal. I'd thought the funeral was the climax, the moment I'd break their illusions. But this was bigger, darker. They weren't just grieving children. They were enemies, and I was their target. Yet Daniel's words echoed and hate them. I wanted to. God, I wanted to, but I couldn't. Not yet. I stood, the house creaking around me, and made a decision. I'd meet them, as Daniel wanted, but not to beg for peace. I'd meet them to fight, to show them every truth they'd refused to see, to claim the justice Daniel deserved. The storm outside had passed, but inside me, it was just beginning. The next morning, I woke to a house that felt too big, too empty. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting fractured colors across the hardwood floor, but it did nothing to warm the chill in my bones. I hadn't slept, not really. The journal lay on my nightstand, its presence a constant reminder of the war I'd started. Emily and Jacob had agreed to the meeting, their text curt and cold. Tomorrow, 7 p.m., don't be late. No location, no details, just a demand. I knew they'd choose the house site was their territory, the place where they could wield their memories of Margaret like a weapon. I wasn't afraid, not exactly, but I felt the weight of what was coming, like a storm cloud gathering on the horizon. I spent the day preparing, not just for the conversation, but for what it might unleash. I reread the journal, page after page of Daniel's jagged handwriting, each entry a piece of a puzzle I was only beginning to understand. There were moments of tenderness, his love for his children, his guilt for failing them, but also moments of fear. They've changed, he wrote in one entry. Emily's anger is colder now, calculated. Jacob follows her lead, but I see his doubt. They think I've betrayed them, but it's Margaret's shadow they're fighting, not Laura. I traced the words, my heart aching. Daniel had seen their pain, but he'd also seen their cruelty, and he'd trusted me to face it. By evening, the house was ready, clean, quiet. The dining room table set with 3 chairs and a pot of coffee I doubted anyone would touch. I wore a simple black dress, not out of mourning, but because it felt like armor. The journal sat in front of me, its cover worn but unyielding, like me. At exactly 7 p.m., the doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. I opened the door to find Emily and Jacob, their faces unreadable, their postures stiff. Let's get this over with, Emily said, brushing past me. Jacob followed, his eyes scanning the room as if looking for traps. We sat at the table, the silence thick enough to choke on. I poured coffee, more to keep my hands busy than to offer hospitality. Emily stared at the journal, her lips pressed into a thin line. So, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. What's your next trick? More lies about our mother. I took a breath, steadying myself. No lies, I said. Just the truth Daniel wanted you to hear. Jacob leaned forward, his voice low. You keep saying that, but all you've done is twist his words to make yourself look good. We're not stupid, Laura. I opened the journal, my fingers steady now. I'm not here to look good, I said. I'm here because Daniel asked me to be. I flipped to a page I'd marked, dated 6 months before his death. October 14th, 2022, I read. Emily came to me today, asking about the trust fund. She thinks Laura's after it, but I told her the truth, it's tied up in investments, untouchable until I'm gone. She didn't believe me. I saw it in her eyes, the same look Margaret had when she stopped trusting me. Emily's face didn't change, but her hands twitched, betraying her. I kept reading. Jacob's worse. He's quiet, but I know he's listening to Emily, letting her fuel his anger. They've been digging, asking questions about Laura's past, looking for something to use against her. I'm scared not for me, but for what they might do. I looked up, meeting their eyes. He knew you were plotting against me, I said. He knew, and he still loved you. Jacob's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Emily laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You're pathetic, she said. You think reading his diary makes you special? You're nothing to us. I didn't flinch. I'd expected this, prepared for it. I'm not trying to be anything to you, I said. I'm trying to show you who your father was. I turned to another page, my voice steady. December 1st, 2022. I found a letter in Emily's old room, one she wrote but never sent. She blames Laura for everything: Margaret's death, my heart problems, the distance between us. She's wrong, but I can't tell her that. She won't listen. Emily's face went pale, her eyes wide. You had no right to read that, she whispered. I didn't, I said. Daniel did. And he wrote about it because he was trying to understand you. I closed the journal, my heart pounding. He loved you, even when you hated him. Even when you hated me. But he also knew you were wrong about me, and he wanted you to see it. Jacob stood, his chair scraping against the floor. This is bullshit, he said. You're just trying to guilt us into giving you the money. Emily nodded, her eyes blazing. You'll never get it, she said. We'll burn this house down before we let you have it. I didn't move, didn't blink. I don't want the money, I said. I want you to stop running from the truth. They stared at me, their anger a wall I couldn't break. But I saw something else in their eyes: doubt, flickering like a candle in the wind. I pushed the journal toward them. Read it, I said. Not for me, for him. Emily hesitated, her hand hovering over the cover, then pulled back. Jacob grabbed it instead, flipping it open with a scowl. Fine, he said. But this changes nothing. They left without another word, the journal tucked under Jacob's arm. I stood in the doorway, watching their car disappear into the night, and felt a strange mix of relief and dread. I'd given them the key to Daniel's heart, but I didn't know if they'd use it to unlock the truth or to build a bigger lie. The house was quiet again, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive, pulsing with the secrets I'd set free. I wasn't done fighting, not yet. Daniel's truth was my weapon, and I'd wield it until they saw him not as the widow, but as the woman who loved him, the woman he trusted to save them from themselves. Days passed, and the silence from Emily and Jacob was deafening. The journal was gone, in their hands now, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd handed them a loaded gun. I stayed in the house, moving through its rooms like a ghost, touching Daniel's things: his books, his old sweaters, the coffee mug he'd used every morning. Each item was a tether to him, a reminder of why I was doing this. I wasn't fighting for the house or the money. I was fighting for the man who'd seen something in me worth loving, even when his children saw only a threat. I kept busy, sorting through Daniel's papers, organizing the chaos he'd left behind. In his study, I found a box of old photos: Margaret smiling with baby Emily, Jacob as a toddler on Daniel's shoulders, the four of them happy in a way I'd never known them. I lingered on those images, wondering what it would have been like to meet that version of their family, before grief twisted it into something sharp and unforgiving. I didn't hate Margaret, not like Emily and Jacob thought. I'd never met her, but I felt her presence in Daniel's stories, in the way he'd pause sometimes, his eyes distant, as if she were still there, watching. On the third day, I found a letter tucked inside a book on Daniel's desk, its envelope yellowed with age. It was addressed to me, in his handwriting, and my heart stuttered as I opened it. Laura, it began, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably wondering why I left you with this burden. I didn't tell you everything not because I didn't trust you, but because I was afraid. Emily and Jacob have been planning something for months, something to hurt you. I overheard them talking about the trust fund, about forging documents to cut you out. I confronted them, but they denied it. I don't know if they'll go through with it, but you need to be ready. The journal will help, but you'll have to be stronger than I ever was. I sat back, my hands trembling, the letter crumpling in my grip. Forging documents? The words sank into me, cold and heavy. I'd known they hated me, but this was different, calculated, deliberate, a betrayal not just of me, but of Daniel. I thought of the journal, of the pages I hadn't read aloud, the ones that hinted at their schemes but never spelled them out. Had they read those pages yet? Did they know their father had seen through them? I needed to find out, but I also needed to protect myself. If they were willing to forge documents, what else were they capable of? I called Hargrove, my voice steady despite the panic clawing at my chest. I need to know about the trust fund, I said. Everything. He hesitated, then agreed to meet me the next day. When he arrived, he brought a stack of papers, his face grim. Daniel set up the trust years ago, he said, spreading the documents on the dining room table. It's ironclad, but there's a clause if fraud is proven, the entire estate reverts to a charitable foundation. Daniel added it after Margaret's death, to protect the family from disputes. I nodded, my mind racing. And if someone tried to forge documents to change it? I asked. Hargrove's eyes narrowed. They'd lose everything. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Emily's face at the funeral, her rage when I read from the journal, Jacob's smirk as he grabbed my arm. They weren't just grieving, they were plotting, and I was their target. But Daniel had known, and he'd left me the tools to fight back. I opened the letter again, rereading his words. You'll have to be stronger than I ever was. I wasn't sure I could be, but I had to try. For him. The next morning, I found an email from Emily, short and sharp. We've read the journal. Meet us at the house tonight. 8 p.m. My stomach twisted, but I typed a reply. I'll be there. I spent the day preparing, not just for their words, but for what they might do. I hid a small recorder in my bag, a precaution Daniel's letter had inspired. If they were planning to hurt me, I'd have proof. I also called a friend, Sarah, and asked her to check on me later that night, just in case. She didn't ask questions, but her voice was tight with worry. At 8 p.m., Emily and Jacob arrived, their faces pale but composed. They sat at the dining room table, the journal between them, its pages marked with sticky notes. Emily spoke first, her voice low. We read it, she said. All of it. Jacob nodded, his eyes on the table. Dad wrote things we didn't know, he said. About Mom, about us. I waited, my heart pounding, unsure if this was a truce or a trap. Emily leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. But we still don't trust you, she said. You could have faked this. All of it. I took a breath, my fingers brushing the recorder in my bag. I didn't, I said. But I know about the documents. Daniel told me. Their faces froze, and for a moment, I saw fear in their eyes, real, raw fear. Jacob recovered first, his voice sharp. What are you talking about, he said. You're bluffing. I pulled out Daniel's letter, sliding it across the table. He wrote this to me, I said. He heard you talking about forging the trust fund, cutting me out. He was scared for me. Emily's hands shook as she read the letter, her face crumpling. Jacob stared at me, his jaw tight. You think you've got us all figured out, he said. But you don't know shit. He stood, towering over me, and for a moment, I thought he might hit me. But Emily grabbed his arm, her voice breaking. Stop, she said. She's not worth it. They left, the journal still on the table, and I sat there, my heart racing, the recorder still running. I didn't know if I'd won or lost, but I knew one thing. The fight was far from over. Daniel's truth was out, and now, so was mine. The house felt like a cage after they left, its walls pressing in with every creak and groan. I played the recording back, my voice and theirs echoing in the quiet, their denial of the forged documents caught in crisp audio. It wasn't enough to prove anything legally, but it was leverage, a shield if they came for me again. I tucked the recorder into a locked drawer in Daniel's study, alongside his letter, and tried to steady my breathing. The journal still sat on the dining room table, its pages fluttering slightly in the draft from an open window. I couldn't bring myself to touch it, not yet. It felt alive, like it was watching me, waiting for my next move. I called Hargrove the next morning, my voice hoarse from lack of sleep. They're planning something, I said, explaining the meeting, the letter, their reaction. He listened quietly, then sighed. Laura, you need to be careful, he said. If they're desperate enough to forge documents, they might try something else. I'll look into the trust fund records, see if there's any evidence of tampering. I thanked him, but his words did little to ease the knot in my chest. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground crumbling beneath me. That afternoon, Sarah came over, her face tight with concern. You look like hell, she said, setting a bag of groceries on the counter. What's going on? I told her everything: the funeral, the journal, the meeting, the letter. Her eyes widened as I spoke, her hands pausing over a carton of milk. Jesus, Laura, she said. This is like something out of a movie. You need to go to the police. I shook my head. I don't have proof, I said. Not yet. And Daniel wanted me to handle this, to make them see the truth. Sarah frowned, her voice soft but firm. Daniel's gone. You don't owe him this. Her words stung, but they also woke something in me. Did I owe Daniel this fight? Or was I fighting for myself now? I thought of the years I'd spent trying to win Emily and Jacob over, the dinners I'd cooked, the birthdays I'd remembered, the love I'd poured into a family that never wanted me. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe this wasn't about Daniel anymore. Maybe it was about proving I wasn't just the widow, that I was more than their hate. That evening, I found a package on the doorstep, a plain manila envelope with no address, just my name scrawled in black marker. My heart sank as I opened it, revealing a single sheet of papyrus photocopy of a trust fund amendment, dated a month before Daniel's death. It named Emily and Jacob as the sole beneficiaries, cutting me out entirely. My hands shook as I read it, the signature at the bottom a perfect imitation of Daniel's, but I knew it wasn't his. I'd seen his handwriting too many times, the way his D's looped, the slant of his L's. This was a forgery, clumsy but dangerous. I called Hargrove again, my voice trembling with rage. They sent me a fake amendment, I said, describing the document. He was silent for a moment, then said, bring it to my office tomorrow. If it's a forgery, we can prove it. But Laura, don't confront them yet. Let me handle this. I agreed, but the urge to storm their apartment, to shove the paper in their faces, was overwhelming. Instead, I locked the document in the drawer with the recorder and Daniel's letter, my mind racing. They were escalating, and I had to be ready. The next day, I met Hargrove at his office, the envelope clutched in my hand. He examined the document, his brow furrowing. This is sloppy, he said. The date's off. Daniel was in the hospital then, too weak to sign anything. And the notary's seal is fake. He looked at me, his eyes serious. We can use this, Laura. If they try to submit it, they're done. I nodded, relief mixing with dread. What do I do now? I asked. He leaned back, his fingers steepled. Wait, he said. Let them make the first move. They don't know you have this, and that's your advantage. I left his office feeling lighter, but not safe. The game had changed, and I was no longer just defending Daniel's truth. I was fighting for my own survival. When I got home, I found another surprise, a voicemail from Emily, her voice soft, almost broken. Laura, she said, we need to talk. Not at the house. Somewhere neutral. Please. I played it again, searching for a trap, but all I heard was exhaustion. Against my better judgment, I texted her back, agreeing to meet at a coffee shop the next day. I didn't tell Hargrove or Sarah. This was my fight now. The coffee shop was crowded, the hum of conversation a buffer against the tension. Emily sat alone at a corner table, no Jacob in sight. She looked different, smaller, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands wrapped around a mug. I read the journal again, she said as I sat down. All of it. I didn't want to believe it, but Dad was telling the truth. About Mom, about you. I waited, my heart in my throat. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't know how much he was hurting. I wanted to believe her, but the forged document burned in my mind. Why now? I asked. After everything, why should I trust you? She looked down, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. Because I'm tired, she said. Tired of being angry, tired of losing everyone. Jacob still. He's not ready. But I am. I studied her, searching for a lie, but all I saw was a girl who'd carried her mother's ghost too long. Okay, I said finally. But no more games, Emily. I know about the amendment. Her eyes widened, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'll make it right, she whispered. I didn't know if she could, but for the first time, I saw a crack in the wall between us. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The coffee shop meeting with Emily left me unsteady, like I'd stepped off a tightrope and wasn't sure if I'd landed or fallen. Her apology, her tears, they felt real, but I couldn't shake the image of that forged document, the calculated cruelty it represented. Jacob hadn't been there, and that worried me more. Emily might be softening, but he was a wild card, his anger colder, more controlled. I drove home with the windows down, the cool night air sharp against my skin, trying to clear the fog in my mind. Daniel's letter echoed in my head. Be stronger than I ever was. I was trying, but God, it was hard. Back at the house, I checked the locked drawer recorder, letter, forged document, all still there. I added a note about Emily's apology, scribbling the date and time, a habit I'd picked up from Daniel. Documentation was my armor now, each piece a shield against whatever Jacob might do next. I called Sarah, updating her on the meeting, and she was skeptical. One of them cracks, and you think it's over? She said. Laura, people don't change that fast. I knew she was right, but I also knew Emily's face, her exhaustion, her guilt wasn't an act. Or at least, I hoped it wasn't. The next day, I met Hargrove again, handing over the forged document for safekeeping. On meeting with Emily, I told him. She says she wants to make things right. He raised an eyebrow, his fingers tapping the desk. And Jacob, he asked. I shook my head. Not yet. Hargrove sighed, sliding the document into a folder. If Emily's serious, she'll need to come clean about this, he said, tapping the folder. If she doesn't, you've got enough to bury them both. I nodded, but the thought of burying them left a bitter taste. I didn't want revenge, not really. I wanted peace for Daniel, for me, maybe even for them. That evening, Emily texted again, asking to meet at a park near the house. Just me, she wrote. Jacob's not ready. I agreed, but I brought the recorder, tucked into my jacket pocket. The park was quiet, the swings creaking in the breeze, the air heavy with the scent of damp grass. Emily sat on a bench, the same one from my vision of that stormy confrontation, though now it was calm, the wooden surface etched with that haunting phrase, "Truth buries lies." I wondered if she'd chosen this spot on purpose. She stood as I approached, her hands shoved in her pockets. I didn't know about the document, she said, her voice low. Not at first. Jacob, he said it was the only way to protect what's ours. I sat down, keeping my distance. And you went along with it? I asked. She shook her head, her eyes on the ground. I didn't stop him, she said. That's just as bad. I waited, letting her words settle. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. She looked up, her face raw. Because I read Dad's journal again. He wrote about you, how you stayed up with him when he couldn't sleep, how you made him laugh. He said you were his second chance. I didn't want to believe it, but I do now. Her words hit me like a wave, pulling me under. I'd spent so long fighting their hate that I hadn't expected this acknowledgement, maybe even respect. What about Jacob? I asked. Emily's face darkened. He's angry, she said. Angrier than I was. He thinks you're playing us, that the journal's a fake. He's talking about going to court, saying we'll prove you forged it. My heart sank. The recorder in my pocket felt heavier, a silent witness to her confession. And you? I asked. What do you think? She sat down, her hands twisting together. I think Dad loved you, she said. And I think we've been wrong about you. But Jacob, he won't stop. Not until he gets what he wants. I nodded, my mind racing. Emily was breaking, but Jacob was doubling down. I needed to act, to protect myself before he made his next move. Help me, I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Help me show him the truth. Emily hesitated, then nodded. Okay, she said. But it won't be easy. We spent the next hour talking, not as enemies, but as two people tied to the same broken man. She told me about her mother, about the fights she'd overheard as a child, about the guilt she carried for not saving her. I told her about Daniel, about the nights he'd wake up gasping, haunted by Margaret's death. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. As we parted, she hugged me, a quick, awkward embrace that felt like a lifeline. I'll talk to Jacob, she said. But be careful. He's not like me. I drove home, my mind a tangle of hope and fear. Emily's shift was a victory, but Jacob's defiance loomed larger. I checked the drawer again, making sure my evidence was safe, then called Hargrove to update him. Emily's on your side, he said, sounding surprised. That's good, but Jacob's the problem. If he tries to submit that forged document, we'll catch him. Just keep her close. I promised I would, but as I hung up, I felt a chill. Jacob wasn't just a problem, was a threat, and I didn't know how far he'd go. That night, I dreamed of Daniel, his face soft but sad. You're doing it, he said, his voice fading. You're stronger than I was. I woke with tears on my cheeks, the journal still on my nightstand, its pages whispering truths I wasn't sure I could bear. But I had to. For Daniel, for Emily, for the family we might still become. Jacob was coming, and I'd be ready not with hate, but with the truth, sharp and unyielding, ready to cut through his lies. The next few days were a waiting game, each hour stretching like a taut wire. Emily texted me updates, short and cautious. Talk to Jacob. He's not listening. He's meeting with a lawyer. I'm trying, Laura. I believed her, but trust was a fragile thing, and Jacob's shadow loomed over every message. I kept the recorder close, checking it daily, as if it might vanish. The forged document was with Hargrove now, locked in his safe, but I made copies, stashing them in a safety deposit box at the bank. I wasn't taking chances. Sarah came over again, bringing wine and her blunt honesty. "You're playing with fire," she said, pouring us both a glass. "Emily might be genuine, but Jacob sounds like he's unhinged." I sipped the wine, its bitterness matching my mood. "He's not unhinged," I said. "He's desperate. He thinks he's protecting his mother's legacy." Sarah snorted. "By forging documents? That's not protection, that's obsession." I didn't argue. She was right, but I couldn't shake Daniel's words from the journal. They're lost, just like I was. Jacob wasn't a monster, not yet. He was a son drowning in grief, and I had to believe there was a way to reach him. Hargrove called the next morning, his voice tight. "Jacob's lawyer contacted me," he said. "They're filing a claim, saying the trust fund amendment is legitimate. They want a hearing." My stomach dropped. "They're using the forgery?" I asked. Hargrove paused. "Looks like it. But we've got the original documents and the hospital records showing Daniel's condition when it was supposedly signed. They're walking into a trap." I should have felt relieved, but all I felt was dread. Jacob wasn't stupid, know the risks. Why was he pushing this? I met Emily at the park again. The same bench, the same carved words staring up at us. Truth buries lies. She looked worse than before, her face pale, her hands trembling. "He's gone too far," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I told him to stop, but he's convinced you're the enemy. He's got this lawyer who says they can win." I leaned forward, my voice low. "Emily, I have proof the document's fake. If he goes through with this, he'll lose everything." Her eyes widened, fear flickering across her face. "You can't tell him that," she said. "He'll think I betrayed him." I took a risk, reaching for her hand. "You're not betraying him," I said. "You're saving him. If he pushes this, the estate goes to charity. Daniel made sure of that." She pulled her hand away, but she didn't leave. "I don't know how to stop him," she said. "He's my brother, but he's different now." I nodded, my mind racing. "Then we stop him together," I said. "But you have to choose, Emily. Him or the truth." She didn't answer, just stared at the bench, her fingers tracing the carved words. The hearing was set for a week later, and Hargrove prepared me like a general readying for battle. "They'll try to paint you as a gold digger," he said, going over the documents. "But we've got the journal, the letter, the hospital records. And if Emily testifies, we're untouchable." I nodded, but the thought of Emily testifying against her own brother made my stomach twist. I didn't want to tear them apart, but Jacob wasn't giving me a choice. The night before the hearing, I found another envelope on the doorstep, this one heavier, sealed with tape. Inside was a USB drive and a note in Jacob's handwriting. "You want the truth? Here it is." My heart pounded as I plugged the drive into my laptop, my hands shaking. It was an audio file, Daniel's voice, weak but clear, recorded months before his death. "Laura," he said, "if you're hearing this, I didn't make it. I know what they're planning. Jacob's been talking to someone, a lawyer, about changing the trust. Emily doesn't know the half of it. I'm sorry I left this for you to fix." I listened again, my chest tight. Daniel had known, not just about their anger, but about Jacob's scheme. The recording was a bombshell, but it also broke my heart. He'd been so alone, carrying this secret, trying to protect us all. I called Hargrove, playing the audio over the phone. "This changes everything," he said. "If we play this at the hearing, Jacob's done." I hesitated. "What about Emily?" I asked. Hargrove sighed. "She'll have to pick a side. You can't save them both." I barely slept that night, Daniel's voice echoing in my dreams. By morning, I was resolved. I'd go to the hearing, present the evidence, and let the truth do its work. But when I arrived at the courthouse, Emily was waiting outside, her face ashen. "Jacob's gone," she said, her voice trembling. "He left last night, took his stuff, and disappeared. He knows about the recording." My heart sank. Jacob running meant guilt, but it also meant he was out there, still a threat. Emily grabbed my arm, her eyes desperate. "I'll testify," she said. "I'll tell them everything. Just don't hate him, Laura. He's my brother." I nodded, my throat tight. "I don't hate him," I said, and I meant it. I hated what he'd done, but I saw Daniel in him, in the stubbornness, the pain. The hearing was a blur. Hargrove presented the forged document, the hospital records, the recording. Emily took the stand, her voice shaking as she admitted her part in the plan, her regret spilling out in tears. The judge ruled quickly. The amendment was invalid. The estate would be divided as Daniel intended. But Jacob's absence hung over the room, a ghost we couldn't banish. As we left the courthouse, Emily hugged me, her sobs muffled against my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For everything." I held her, feeling the weight of Daniel's love, his hope for us. Jacob was gone, but Emily was here, and maybe that was enough. The truth had buried the lies, just like the bench said. Now, I had to figure out what came next. The days after the hearing were quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that follows a storm, eerie, expectant, as if the world was holding its breath. Emily stayed in touch, texting me daily, her messages a mix of guilt and tentative hope. "Can we meet soon?" she wrote one morning. "I want to talk about Dad." I agreed, but my mind was on Jacob. His disappearance gnawed at me, a loose thread in a tapestry I thought I'd woven tight. Where was he? What was he planning? The recording had exposed him, but it hadn't stopped him. I kept the recorder and Daniel's letter close, checking the locks on the house each night, my paranoia a constant companion. Hargrove called to confirm the estate's division was proceeding equal shares from me, Emily, and Jacob, though Jacob's portion would be held until he resurfaced. "He can't hide forever," Hargrove said. "The law will find him." I nodded into the phone, but I wasn't so sure. Jacob was smart, driven by a rage I didn't fully understand. I spent hours rereading the journal, searching for clues about him, about what had pushed him so far. One entry, dated a year before Daniel's death, stood out. "Jacob's been asking about Margaret's will. He thinks I changed it to favor Laura." I tried to explain, but he's built a wall I can't climb. I met Emily at the coffee shop again, her face softer now, less guarded. She brought a photo album, its pages filled with pictures of Daniel and her as a child building sandcastles, laughing at a fair, decorating a Christmas tree. "I found this in Mom's old stuff," she said, her fingers tracing a photo of Daniel holding her on his shoulders. I forgot how happy he was. I smiled, my throat tight. "He loved you so much," I said, "even when things got hard." She nodded, tears welling. "I wish I'd seen it sooner," she said. "I wish I'd seen you." We talked for hours, sharing stories about Daniel, his terrible puns, his obsession with old jazz records, the way he'd leave sticky notes with random thoughts around the house. It was the first time we'd connected, not as enemies, but as two people who'd loved the same man. But Jacob's absence hung between us, unspoken but heavy. "Have you heard from him?" I asked finally. Emily shook her head. "Not since the night before the hearing," she said. "He left a note saying he needed space." "I'm scared, Laura. What if he does something stupid?" I didn't have an answer, but her fear mirrored mine. Jacob wasn't just running from the law. He was running from the truth about his mother, his father, himself. I wanted to help Emily find him, but I also knew he was dangerous. "We'll figure it out," I said, squeezing her hand. "Together." She nodded, but her eyes were distant, haunted by a brother she couldn't reach. That night, I found another envelope on the doorstep, this one smaller, with no writing. Inside was a single photo and Daniel, taken last summer in the garden, laughing as we tried to plant roses. On the back, in Jacob's handwriting, was one word: "Why?" My heart raced as I studied the photo, searching for a clue. Why what? Why did I love Daniel? Why was I fighting? Why hadn't I given up? I locked the door, my hands shaking, and called Sarah. "He's been here," I said, my voice trembling. "Jacob. He left a photo." She was at the house in 20 minutes, her face pale. "You need to call the police," she said. "Now." I hesitated. The police could protect me, but they couldn't fix this. Jacob wasn't just a threat. He was a broken piece of Daniel's family, and I'd promised to try to save them. Instead, I called Emily, telling her about the photo. "He's watching me," I said. "He's close." She was silent for a moment, then said, "I know where he might be. There's a cabin, upstate, where Mom used to take us. He goes there when he's upset." She gave me the address, her voice shaking. "Don't go alone," she said. "Please." I didn't listen. I couldn't wait for the police, for Hargrove, for anyone. If Jacob was at the cabin, I needed to face him, to end this before it spiraled further. I packed a bag recorder, letter, a flashlight, and drove through the night. The address burned into my mind. The cabin was remote, tucked into a dense forest, its windows dark when I arrived. I parked a distance away, my heart pounding, and approached on foot, the crunch of leaves loud in the silence. The door was unlocked, creaking as I pushed it open. Inside, the air was stale, the furniture covered in dust. A single light glowed from the back room, and I followed it, my breath shallow. Jacob sat at a table, the journal open in front of him, his face haggard. He looked up, unsurprised. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice flat. I set my bag down, keeping my distance. "Neither should you," I said. "Running doesn't fix this, Jacob." He laughed, a hollow sound. "You think you've won," he said. "You think that journal makes you right. But you don't know me. You don't know what I've lost." I stepped closer, my voice steady. "I know you lost your mom," I said. "And I know you think I took your dad. But I loved him, Jacob. And he loved you." He shook his head, his hands gripping the journal. "He loved you more," he said, his voice breaking. "That's why he gave you everything." I pulled out the letter, sliding it toward him. "Read it," I said. "He was trying to protect you, not me." Jacob stared at the letter, his eyes wet, and for the first time, I saw not anger but pain. The truth was breaking him, just as it had broken me. The cabin's air was thick with dust and unspoken words, the single bulb casting harsh shadows across Jacob's face. He held Daniel's letter, his hands trembling, but he didn't open it. His eyes, red-rimmed and hollow, stayed on me, searching for something weakness, maybe, or a lie. I stood still, the recorder in my pocket a silent ally, my heart pounding, but my voice calm. "Read it, Jacob," I said again. "It's not about me. It's about you and Emily and what your dad wanted for you." He laughed, a bitter edge to it, and tossed the letter onto the table. "You think I care what he wanted?" he said. "He chose you. He left us behind." I took a step closer, ignoring the fear prickling my skin. "He never left you," I said. "You pushed him away. You and Emily both. But he kept trying, even when you made it impossible." Jacob's jaw tightened, his fingers curling into fists. "You don't get to say that," he said. "You didn't know him like we did." I nodded, conceding the point. "You're right," I said. "I didn't know him as a father. But I knew him as a man who carried your pain every day. That journal," I pointed to it, "open on the table, it's not just words. It's him, begging you to see the truth." He glanced at the journal, his expression wavering. I saw a crack, a flicker of doubt, and I pressed forward. "You forged that document," I said, my voice low but firm. "You tried to cut me out because you thought I was the enemy. But Daniel knew, Jacob. He heard you planning it. He still loved you." His face crumpled, just for a moment, before hardening again. "You're lying," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He grabbed the letter, tearing it open, his eyes scanning the words. I watched him read, saw the moment Daniel's handwriting hit him, the familiar loops and slants undeniable. "He was scared for me," I said softly. "Not because of the money, but because he knew you were lost. He didn't want you to lose yourself to this." Jacob's hands shook, the letter falling to the table. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he whispered. I wanted to protect Mom's memory. I thought you were erasing her." His voice broke, and I saw the boy he'd been, the one in the photos, clinging to a mother who was gone. I wanted to hate him, but all I felt was pity. "I'm not erasing her," I said. "I never wanted to. Daniel loved her, and so do you. But hating me won't bring her back." He looked up, tears streaming down his face, and for the first time, I saw no anger, just grief. "I fucked up," he said, his voice raw. "I fucked everything up." I stepped closer, my hand hovering, wanting to comfort him but unsure if I should. "You can fix it," I said. "Not for me, for Emily. For your dad." He shook his head, his hands covering his face. "Emily hates me now," he said. "She's on your side." I knelt beside him, my voice gentle. "She's not on my side," I said. "She's on your dad's side. And she wants you back." He looked at me, his eyes searching, and I saw the weight of his choices crashing down. "What do I do?" he asked, his voice small. I took a breath, feeling the moment shift, the truth finally breaking through. "Come home," I said. "Face it. All of it." We sat in silence, the cabin creaking around us, the journal and letter lying like relics between us. Jacob didn't agree, not outright, but he didn't run either. I drove him back to the city at dawn, the recorder still in my pocket, and used but ready. He was quiet the whole way, his face turned to the window, but I felt a shift, a loosening of the knot we'd all been tied in. When we reached the house, Emily was waiting, her eyes wide with relief and fear. She ran to Jacob, hugging him, her sobs muffled against his chest. "I'm sorry," he whispered, and I stepped back, giving them space. Later, we sat in the living room, Emily, Jacob, the journal on the coffee table. They talked, haltingly at first, about Margaret, about Daniel, about the years they'd lost to anger. I listened, not as an outsider, but as a witness, my heart heavy but hopeful. Jacob admitted to the forged document, his voice shaking, and Emily cried, but she didn't pull away. "We'll fix it," she said, echoing my words. "Together." I nodded, my throat tight. This wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Before they left, Jacob turned to me, his eyes clear for the first time. "I was wrong about you," he said. "I'm not saying I like you, but I was wrong." I smiled, a small, tired smile. "That's enough," I said. They left together, their steps lighter, and I stood in the doorway, the house quiet behind me. The journal was still there, its pages worn but whole, like me. I'd kept my promise to Daniel, not just to show them the truth, but to help them find their way back. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. The weeks that followed were a slow unraveling, a stitching together of wounds that had festered too long. Emily and Jacob met with Hargrove, confessing to the forged document, their voices low but steady as they laid out their mistakes. The judge was lenient, considering their remorse and Daniel's clear intent in the original trust. The estate was divided as planned, equal shares, no charity clause triggered, a small miracle given the chaos we'd waded through. I didn't care about the money, not really. What mattered was the shift in Emily and Jacob, the way they looked at me now, not with love, but with something closer to respect. We started meeting regularly, not at the house, but at neutral places, coffee shops, parks, once at the cemetery where Daniel rested. They brought stories, memories of their father I hadn't known, and I shared mine, piecing together the man we'd all loved in different ways. Emily showed me a letter she'd written to Margaret, one she'd never sent, full of questions she'd never asked. "I blamed you for taking Dad's attention," she admitted one day, her eyes on the ground. "But it wasn't you. It was me, not letting go." I nodded, my heart aching for her. "You were a kid," I said. "You did what you could." Jacob was slower to open up, his guilt a heavier burden. He'd been the architect of the forgery, the one who'd pushed Emily to follow. But at the cemetery, under a sky bruised with clouds, he handed me a photo, the same one he'd left on my doorstep, me and Daniel in the garden. "I kept this," he said. "I don't know why. Maybe because he looked happy." I took it, my fingers brushing the image, and felt Daniel's presence, warm and steady. He was, I said. We both were. The journal became our bridge, its pages a map of Daniel's heart. We read it together sometimes, taking turns, letting his words fill the silences between us. One entry, near the end, brought us all to tears. "Laura gave me a second chance, but Emily and Jacob are my first. I hope they find their way to each other, and to her. She's stronger than she knows." I closed the journal that day, my hands steady, and looked at them, stepchildren, not my enemies. "He'd be proud of you," I said, and for the first time, they didn't look away. The house was sold, the proceeds split as Daniel wanted. I moved into a smaller place, a cottage with a garden where I planted roses, like the ones Daniel and I had tried to grow. Emily and Jacob visited sometimes, bringing coffee or stories, their visits tentative but real. We weren't a family, not in the traditional sense, but we were something bound by loss, by truth, by the slow work of redemption. I kept the journal on a shelf, its cover worn but unbowed, a reminder of the promise I'd kept. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I sat in the garden, the photo of me and Daniel in my hands. Emily and Jacob were coming over later, a casual dinner, nothing forced. I thought of the funeral, of their words, "Shut up, you're just the widow," and how far we'd come. I wasn't just the widow anymore. I was Laura, the woman who'd loved Daniel, who'd fought for his truth, who'd found a way to heal a family that wasn't mine by blood but by choice. The roses bloomed around me, their petals soft against the dusk, and I felt a peace I hadn't known was possible. The truth had buried the lies, and in its place, something new was growing.